Hello everyone, my name is Kashish Mittal and today we'll be starting with our first webinar of the Whale Week, and in this webinar we'll be covering some of the basic topics such as what is Docker, and we'll look at the installation process of Docker. Now, so let's get started with what exactly Docker is. So as you all know that uh, Docker in plain terms or basically technical terms is nothing but just an container platform. Now, what does that mean? Let's get to know it with the help of one example or in a much easier manner. You all are familiar with what exactly a software is or what an app is. It's not just a piece of component. You know that it is made up of different components and different parts which are combined together to form an application or a software. Now, for example, we know that different components such as a front end or a back end, some of the databases, servers, libraries, dependencies, all these just make up an software. Now, what problems do we face when we create an app? While we are deploying our app onto different machines onto which our app can run, we often face this problem that our application is running onto our environment onto which it is created or basically developed, but it is not working onto different environments such as our testing environment or staging environment. Now, to make sure that it runs properly and as it was created, we need to individually work on each and every component, such as like the back end, front end, and etc. The different components, to make sure that it is compatible with each and every machines or each and every environment onto which our application or software can be deployed. So this makes our work very tedious and hard for us. Now this is where Docker comes into picture as a savior. Docker is basically, you can say, it's just like a tool which is designed to make our work of creating and running and deploying of application very easy for us using something which is known as containers. Now what are these containers? As I said earlier, that an application is made up of different components, so we can just package all the components, all the dependencies and libraries together as one unit, and then put this package into this container. And Docker can help us to deploy this container onto different machines where you can run these containers and your app will run as it was running onto your development environment. So I hope that it is clear that what exactly Docker is to all the ones who are very new to Docker. Let's move forward. Excuse me. Let's move forward onto how Docker works and see a general workflow of Docker. Now here you can observe this image and can see that initially a developer, he or she creates his or her application and software. Now what is Docker file? All these components and its parts are packaged together into a file which is known as Docker file. Now these Docker files, these are used to create something which is known as Docker images. We'll be covering in detail about Docker images and Docker files in our later sessions as we move forward. As of now, just remember that Docker files are used to create Docker images, and onto running of these Docker images, we get Docker containers. Also, Docker images can be stored onto Docker Hub. Now, what is Docker Hub? So Docker Hub is basically an online cloud platform where you can store all of your Docker images. It is very similar to that of GitHub, as on GitHub we store all our codes and we can easily pull our codes from GitHub. Similar is the case with Docker Hub. We can store all our Docker images onto Docker Hub and can easily pull those images onto different environments as and when we need it. And on running on of these Docker images, we get the Docker container, and our application will run as it runs on our development environment. Also, when you'll visit Docker Hub, you'll be able to see many publicly available images of different softwares and different applications which are already made and uploaded. You can also create your own and upload it onto the Docker Hub. Now, moving forward, since I said that Docker is a container based platform, so it will be very beneficial for us if we'll get ourselves familiarized with what is the difference between virtualization and containerization, or you can say basically virtual machines or Docker containers. It will help us to know that how these container-based platforms such as Docker can make our work more and more easy. Now, moving forward, in the concept of virtualization, you can see that there is a stack. Here is something known as hypervisor. Now, what is this hypervisor? This hypervisor is nothing but a software which is used to create and run virtual machines. Now, these hypervisors can create multiple virtual machines onto our host operating system. These virtual machines have their own operating systems, which are overheaded onto our what we say host operating systems. So, this is one of the disadvantages of virtual machines, you can say. Also, in case of virtual machines, we need to allocate a fixed amount of memory, space, and other resources to each and every component of the virtual machines. So this leads to the wastage of storage in our applications and onto our system. Now let's move forward and talk about containerization. So what is containerization? In case of containerization, there is something known as container engine. And onto this container engine, several containers are stacked together. Now, these containers, as we have discussed earlier in the workflow, contains the app and its various component informations, dependencies, and libraries together as one unit. Now, the advantage of using Docker containers or containerization is that it do not have its separate operating system, and it uses the host operating system itself. Also, the memory space and other resources, they are not fixed in case of containers. They keep on changing and gets allocated according to the requirement of the application. This is one thing which makes Docker containers very lightweight and very fast as an application. So, in case of Docker, these container engines are the Docker engines. So, what exactly are Docker engines? As To understand what Docker engines are, we need to look onto a very basic architecture onto which Docker is made, and this architecture is known as client server architecture. Now, what is this client server architecture? In case of in case of Docker, the command line interface is nothing but the client, where you can give various commands which will reach to the server. The Docker server is also known as the Docker daemon. It receives all the commands from the client, that is the command line interface. Now, these Docker servers or Docker daemons, these contains or has all the containers contained in it. So the combination of the client and the server, that is the command line interface and the Docker daemon together, forms what we called as the Docker engine. So I hope now it is clear that what is the difference between virtualization and containerization. Now we'll just move forward onto the installation process of Docker onto different operating systems. I'll be giving a demo of installation of Docker onto Mac OS operating system, and we'll also be discussing about Docker installation onto Windows operating system. So in order to install Docker, you just need to type Docker documentation. And you can see this bar, just click on docs and this page will open. Now inside this, go to product manuals option, and as you'll scroll down onto the left, you can see here this Docker desktop for Mac and Docker desktop for Windows. Now we'll be going for Docker desktop for Mac for the demo. Just click on it and go to install Docker desktop for Mac. Then click on download from Docker Hub. It is taking a little time. Now, one more thing before this, you need to create your ID onto Docker Hub. Just go to the official website of Docker Hub, create your profile and ID from there, and use those credentials to log in. I have already created one and have logged in from my credentials. Now you just need to log in and follow the same process, and then you will land on this window, that is the Docker desktop from for Mac. Now just look onto this right corner and you can see that different for different versions, as we have seen, we need to download two different things. This will be more clear from this. These are basically the prerequisites, you can say, for downloading Docker. If you're having Mac OS version usability of 10.10.3 or above, you can directly download Docker onto your system. But if you have any older versions before it, you need to download Docker Toolbox in order to get Docker onto your system. You can just refer to this link